I wanted to say two things. First, to thank all the panelists. We have approximately 30 minutes for questions and answers so that the next panelists can be prepared. In Cuba, there exists union monopoly. There is the Central Union of Cuba. It is compulsory unionism, and they have asked the government of Cuba to modify Law 49 of the Labor Code and to eliminate the word, the Central Cuban Union. Of course, the bureaucracy will not do that, and 5 million Cuban workers will continue to be affiliated to that union. Carmelo was referring to something very important, which is the future firing of those workers who will be, because there is no unemployment subsidy. When it reports the statistics that are laughable, as it did publish those till last April, which are very different from the statistics of the CEPAL. It said that 1.8%, that's full employment. That is lower than an unemployment rate in Switzerland and Sweden. But if he's to sell matches in a cafeteria or a restaurant in Cuba, it requires 3 workers, so 3 match salesmen. But there are very good economists who will describe this very well for you in the next panel. And they will tell you what is happening today in Cuba. All measures of self-employment or the promotion of those foreign investments in Cuba are not because they want further investment, so they will improve the economy. They need this because they need more capital in order to continue to exploit the Cuban workers. And with that, you may all now proceed to ask your questions. Thank you. Until you get a microphone, please don't ask a question. Jaime Rios, National Endowment for Democracy. Could any one of you speak about the future? This 1.5 million that will be unemployed. After we heard the description of, as you presented, the labor sector of Cuba, once a worker is fired and he becomes self-employed, the plan that the government is imposing, then he would not be a member of the Cuban Central Union. Is there a plan that the government has to unionize or to control that self-employed sector that's going to emerge? Because there are going to be hundreds of thousands of people who will be unemployed. And if not, what potential is there for that sector to unionize independently? I'm going to go beyond the authority of my fellow panelists, since I am interested in everything that the Cuban government has done, and because I worked in its planning section. They have 19 national unions. If there are now 1.5 million workers who are going to be self-employed in all of these sectors that are not producing anything, what they do is distribute because match man or a clown or a dandy in old Havana doesn't create any domestic income. It just simply distributes what little money exists. There is an article by Mena who says that all of these workers will need to be represented, and they will be represented by the only organization that is capable of doing so. It is the Cuban Central Union, which recognizes that they continue with the policies of the Cuban Communist Party, and Mr. Mesa, who is a member of the Political Bureau, and all of the members of the national unions are under the signatures of Fidel Castro and Raúl Castro. There's no possibility for self-employed people to or for the labor sector to absorb these 1 million people. How could you possibly distribute that work arithmetically or mathematically? It is impossible to distribute all of these workers. Eventually, the self-employed will be able to join independent unions and not the official unions, which is the one responsible for their poverty and their misery, who are being launched by the street when we know that the government said that no one would be unemployed. And this has happened since 1959. I think that this is part of your answer. I think that Carmelo can expand.
Well, generally, those who are self-employed and who don't want to belong to any union at all, not the official union nor the independent unions. Of course, we worked with the self-employed workers, and precisely the independent unions in Cuba, we had a union called the Self-Employed People's Union. The Secretary General was Minardo, Mr. Salgado. He was the General Secretary of that union, and the work that we did in that union was precisely to invite all those who were independent workers to join that union, because we always felt, as we've always felt, that the union is an organization of workers and members, not of leaders or individuals who run things. We want these workers, self-employed people, to join our union, and we started with some of them, and others came in without our even talking to them. Some of them came through friendship, others came because they were encouraged, others but actually that union does exist, self-employed people's union, and there's another union divided up by professions: carpenters, bricklayers, automobile mechanics, artisans. We had 16 different unions divided up by trade, and one which covered a union for the unemployed, or for the self-employed, pardon me. People who sold fried food, say, they joined that union. They were quite numerous in comparison with the situation today. People are afraid anyway. But in any case, the government has among its purposes creating a union organization of the self-employed self-employed, so they will join it and control them in that way. That's possible that some in Cuba, because also there is a phenomenon occurring there. The independent unions, anybody who belongs to an official union also can belong to our union. These are two unions, CTC, but they're also affiliated into our group, and they're not secretly affiliated to us. They are affiliated with our union, and they say it, but they pay their dues to the official union, and they're afraid, of course, and if they don't belong to the official union, well, then they can't progress. They can't get a better salary, a better position, say, and move up because they've studied, but they also belong to our union. The majority of the members of the independent unions in Cuba, which are a reality, also belong to the CTC, the official union. And some of them who don't belong to the official union do belong to our unions, and they don't want the official union. That official union that wants to join up the self-employed workers, well, they're afraid that they may lose their work permit if they don't join, and the threat is there. They may say, well, you have a work permit so far, but they also belong to our union. They have the doors open to join our union, and we have publicly called, and this is published on the internet. More than once we published this on the internet to have all those who want to join our independent union of the self-employed can do so without any fear. They will be received with open arms, and of course they will learn, because we have our workshops, the Monday workshops. These Monday workshops, it's all published on the internet as well. We give classes on union actions, and a book written by Mr. Frank Cordova, a prestigious union leader. He was our teacher, and the classes we give, we publish. We say this is based on Frank Cordova's book. In other words, the prestigious union member is used, and we study that book day by day. The first and the last Monday we give these courses. Well, the last time an ambulance came up they were going to beat those attending, but we knew about this. We didn't offer the course on Monday, it was Saturday, and they went on Monday to attack the workers. El inciso de Schenker, esta pregunta es en cuanto al futuro también. Me parece que alguien lo dijo ayer, que toda la cuestión de información es la clave. Se está haciendo la interpretación. Bueno, hay que ofrecerles el aparato de interpretación. Sería bueno que se les ofreciera el aparato de interpretación. Perdone. I'm sorry, I don't speak much Spanish. Please hand out the interpretation device to those who are to answer the questions. Channel 3. ¿Me pueden oír? Bueno, está en el canal 3. Vamos a ver si ella puede empezar de nuevo. ¿Todo el mundo oye? Muy bien, ¿me oyen bien? Muy bien. Yo soy Eugenia Campbell del Instituto Albert Shanker. Tengo una pregunta acerca del futuro también. Me parece, por lo dicho ayer y por la experiencia mía también, que la cuestión de información de adentro es la clave. Tom se acuerda de eso, puede hablar largamente de cuando la RSIO ayudó a los trabajadores polacos. Una buena parte de la función era obtener prensas para imprimir, mandarlos a Polonia. Pues yo sé que el régimen tiene mucho poder para bloquear las cosas, pero sabemos que en la China, por ejemplo, que las cosas pasan, aun cuando pueden bloquear Google, pero hay diferentes maneras que la gente lista que trabaja con la tecnología puede entrar a la China. Yo me pregunto si ustedes no han pensado en una estrategia de información, llegar a más personas dentro de Cuba. Sabemos que los levantamientos en el África del Norte en parte fueron facilitadas, no que se quiere, eso tampoco es por su acceso a la tecnología, la información, creo que el Internet se refiere, ¿no? Since we began our struggle for free unions, that has been our main objective, to educate the mass of Cuban workers. I think that the first task that we've taken on with the very scarce resources that we have gotten within the island, my organization itself, very often we've suffered the attack of the hordes of state security. Before the computers even existed, we wanted typewriters. And I don't know how many typewriters were confiscated of mine, because this was the medium that we used to reproduce things, to run off copies. Also, we used certain embassies which made copies of things for us. But this, you have to remember that Cuba is an island. It's a long island. And that everything is located in Havana. Everything is run. To get into the interior of the island it's not impossible, but it is very difficult. Because practically today the Cuban people are completely isolated. To travel from one province to another is a difficult thing. To travel through 3 provinces is even more difficult. Only the eastern provinces, there are 5 of them, and I had a coordinator who had to cover all of those provinces, and he's poor. He had to travel by mule sometimes, or whatever he could use, because they're called ghost towns, because they're villages which a month goes by and they haven't even seen a bus. If anybody has a problem or has a medical problem, they'll never get to the hospital, die on the way. Of course, since once we were prisoners, the cell phones moved into Cuba, the iPhones are coming in with different programs, and well, I think this will, and in fact, the program that exists with the internet now, the bloggers, this has arisen from the new technologies, because there is a reality. The regime has neutralized the broadcasts that are done from here to the island. Telemarti has practically no effect. Radio Marti is listened to more in certain areas. In certain areas, the government is able to jam it, but to mention one thing, I know that here there are union members, and you know what a union is. You must keep in mind that in Cuba, we say our union organizations actually are organizations that promote these union values. We're not a real union because we can't work as such. To give you some idea, they're rather large organizations. We have a large membership. He's in a union that his colleague has a lot. And the Council of Union, we have 7 delegations, and we have a lot of people, but that is our work, to try to implant this idea of freedom, because we're thinking precisely of the future. Presently, what we do, we are the voices of those workers who don't have any way to channel their concerns and their protests, nor their denunciations, because Cuba has been condemned for some reason in the international organization, in the International Labor Organization, and we publish reports and we send them to you who help us. Now I'm here and I help my people who are there. That's why we have achieved in these international events, we've made known the realities as was done by René and other union leaders who've been here for years. But unfortunately, as I said yesterday, there are not many ears that are receptive to this. Not because they don't understand, they know the reality, but they don't want to have any problems. They don't want to fight with the Cuban government. The Cuban government, even though a lot of people don't believe it, they do have a lot of power still. Microphone. We can't hear the speaker at all. No se escucha la voz de que habla. Sin micrófono es imposible. Good morning. It's an honor to be at Mauricio Robles with LOPMCIA, which is the Union of Plaster Workers in Construction. From what I understand, and according to your testimony, there is a government union, which is the CTC. What does an independent union organizer offer, which is better offer than what the CTC offers, so that people in the CT will belong to both unions, or that they would leave the CTC? I will summarize that in one word: freedom. That's the only thing we can offer, the independent unions can offer to Cuban workers. Carmelo said in a documentary which we distributed and which was made in Cuba, what the independent unions can offer to the members who want to join you is a dark cell, because when they join independent unions, they automatically run the risk of being arrested by the government. Unfortunately, we don't live in a country with democracy. We live under one of the cruelest tyrannies that Latin America has had, if not the cruelest. And that is, the thing is that people, the workers have always resisted, and they've begun now to attempt to take the first steps of public demonstrations against the government, because sincerely, a strike in government is to condemn you to long years of prison. It's not just the group of 75. Since 1959, this man has put in prison and shot all the people who were against the regime. Ernesto here. I agree with Carmelo. I wrote the question to not stray from the objective. My question has two parts. thoughts. First is for Roberto, for Pedro, Pablo, and Carmelo. It says, to what extent do you consider that the initiatives for support of the Free Union Committee and the Pro-Free Union Group could influence or stimulate the development of free unions within Cuba? The second question is for Joel. How important do you think is the revitalization of international work seeking solidarity with Cuban workers?
Well, I have stated this on several occasions. Thanks to your cooperation, in the island there are now computers. And there are cameras and digital cameras in the cellular phones. When we have internet, they last only for a few hours. We say we have to support our brothers in Cuba with a new technology. And I can assure you that the regime will continue to lag. There are antennas that can be built for $10, but the state cuts them, the government cuts them, ends them, but new ones spring up. As happens whenever we have the information, because people are really thirsty for information. Since time is ending and we must conclude this panel, international work, solidarity work is decisive. We have continued to do this. We continue to present the cases against the lack of freedom. We continue to work with the International Free Trade Union in Brussels. As all of those union members went to Spain, we presented their case, and 1 week afterwards, the ICFTU received them, and also they express their solidarity. But these expressions of solidarity do not reach Cuba. They stay in that immense bureaucracy of the unions, and it is also in the ILO. But we must continue our fight internationally, because Cuba sends more than 160 union delegations everywhere. They train more than 300 union leaders yearly. So we have to counteract. And it is very few of us who have the real capacity to travel abroad and state what the government of Cuba is doing. But initiatives such as Tom's of creating the CFTU, like the ones activities you did by traveling throughout Europe and Latin America, denouncing all violations against unions, and yearly visit to the international organizations to accuse Cuba. We need that, but there are limitations of all kinds, human and resource-wise. We must continue working. That is the only answer to your question. Thank you. One more question, and then we have to close. I'm a Cuban. I came in 93. We know that the CTC exists. I worked in Cuba and I was a member of the CTC, but I didn't know what a union was until I came to this country. The CTC is part of the government. It doesn't protect me at all. It didn't protect me at all. But it is in this country that we came to know what a union really means. A union union is an organization that is created to protect the workers. The owner of the company in Cuban is the government, and the owner of the CTC is the government. So it's common sense. There is nothing. Now, everyone knows that in Cuba there are two faces. The Cuban people must accept those two faces, or else they don't exist, they don't live. Not everybody can stand up and say, I'm against the government, and stand in front of the government and tell the government this. We want to say, enough is enough. But the people have a family, and if they are sent to jail or if they're imprisoned, how can that people who has been so massacred, so gravely damaged, how can we ask them to say, the government is never going to recognize us? So how do you think we can have the government accept an independent union? And for the people to say, once it is legal, I can withdraw from the CTC, and I'm going to be a part of the independent union, which will protect. I go to your question and to that of Ileana. Yes, a quick question. Perhaps we can go over this topic for the rest of the day. When he asks, how are you going to unite the independent workers or the self-employed? It occurs to me that when this CTC existed for the first 30 years, it represented the workers of the state, in other words, the government workers. Then the Soviet bloc came. There was an end to the subsidies, so that everyone became equal. Then the workers started to work in the semi-independent, semi-private sector. This is a contradiction. It's against the statutes. Who can represent the Cuban workers? And thirdly, the independent workers doesn't work for mixed companies or for the state. In other words, they work for themselves. And the government of Cuba can't undo this. We are going to have a brief time after 3:45 to discuss all of these other things. But I would like to have the Longshoremen's representative answer this question. I wanted to do so briefly because the time does not allow me to give you a very full answer. Since the brother asked a question as to what is the future and what can we offer the self-employed who want to incorporate themselves to us. Well, the only thing we can offer them is freedom. They know that we have no money, that we are very poor, that only jail awaits us. And we ourselves can tell the tale. The workers want to defend their workers, whatever cost, at whatever cost. And they know that we are giving them the tools so that they can defend themselves. This is what we offer them. This is what we can offer the unions that join us. And they do want to work. It is true that there is many young people and some not so young whom the government knows are not going to be beaten by the government. Perhaps you don't quite understand this. But thank you again. As I was saying, At the end of the third panel, we're going to have a little time for questions and answers, and we have 45 or 50 minutes. So, since Jack Otero is going to moderate that part, that section, please make your questions very brief.